Everyone in the courtroom froze. The little girl sitting in the witness stand had just lifted her hand and subtly tugged on her left ear. At first, no one thought much of it until the dog sitting beside her barked, low and firm, eyes locked on the man at the defense table. That bark changed everything. 12-year-old Emily Summers had been silent for weeks. After what happened in the barn that summer afternoon, she hadn't spoken more than a few words. The trauma had sealed her lips, but not her heart. She had seen something terrifying, and now, in front of the judge, the jury, and the man who had hurt her family, she was about to tell the truth, without saying a word. Emily lived with her grandfather on a small farm in Oregon. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 6, and Grandpa Joe had been her rock ever since. Life wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. They had chickens, goats, and most importantly, a golden retriever named Max. Max was more than a pet. He was Emily's best friend, protector, and safe place in a world that often felt too loud. One evening, a man named Richard Klein came by the farm. He was a local businessman who claimed he was interested in buying the property to turn it into a winery. Grandpa Joe wasn't interested. The farm had been in their family for generations. But Richard was persistent, and not in a friendly way. Emily didn't understand all the grown-up conversations, but she noticed how Grandpa Joe's shoulders tensed when Richard showed up. Then came the night everything changed. Emily had gone into the barn to feed the goats when she heard voices arguing. Her grandfather and Richard. The shouting escalated. There was a crash, then silence. Terrified, Emily peeked through the slats in the barn wall. What she saw made her freeze, Richard pushing Grandpa Joe, who collapsed and lay still. Richard looked around and ran. Emily wanted to scream, to cry, but she couldn't move. That moment lodged deep in her chest like a shard of glass. When the police came, Richard claimed it was an accident. That Joe had fallen and hit his head. There were no cameras. No other witnesses. Just a child, traumatized and unable to speak. At first, Emily was inconsolable. Therapists tried. Detectives asked questions gently. But the fear had locked her away in silence. Until one day, a new kind of therapy was introduced, canine court companions. Dogs trained to comfort child witnesses in court. That's when Max was certified and brought in to sit beside Emily if she ever chose to testify. Max's presence changed everything. The moment he padded into the room, tail wagging gently, Emily's eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. He lay his head on her lap, and she finally whispered, "I'm scared." It was a start. With time and help, Emily began to work through her trauma. But she still refused to speak in court. That's when her therapist had an idea. What if Emily could communicate in a way that felt safe? So they came up with a system. Simple signals. If Emily saw the person who hurt Grandpa Joe, she would tug her left ear. If she was unsure, she would cross her arms. If she didn't see him, she'd scratch her nose. Max was trained to recognize those cues and respond. It was unconventional, yes. But the judge agreed, given the trauma and the child's refusal to speak aloud. And now, here they were. Emily, seated on the witness stand, Max lying at her feet. Her fingers shook slightly as the prosecutor asked her the question, "Emily, do you see the person who hurt your grandfather in this room today?" Silence fell. Emily looked around. Then her hand rose and tugged gently on her left ear. Max sat up. One bark. Deep. Certain. Unwavering. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, the judge calling for silence. Richard shifted in his seat, face pale. The jury watched intently. The prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the witness has given a positive identification using the pre-approved signal." The defense objected, of course. They claimed it wasn't reliable. That it was just a dog barking. But then came the second moment that would change everything. The therapist took the stand and testified to the hours Emily and Max had spent together. The training. The accuracy. The trust. Then, unexpectedly, Emily spoke. Her voice was quiet, fragile. "He pushed Grandpa," she said, staring straight at Richard. "He said he'd make us leave. But Grandpa wouldn't sell." Tears welled in her eyes, and Max nuzzled her side. She gripped his fur, drawing strength. The courtroom was silent, stunned. For weeks, they had waited for this child to speak. And now, her voice, shaky, but strong, cut through every lie. Richard was found guilty of manslaughter and coercion. But that wasn't the end of the story. After the trial, Emily began to heal. She still had nightmares, but they lessened. She started talking more, playing outside again, even riding her bike down the old dirt path Grandpa Joe used to take with her. She planted sunflowers by the barn in his memory. And Max? Max stayed by her side through it all. Her silent guardian. Her friend. The case made headlines not because of the crime, but because of the courage. A little girl. A dog. And a truth that couldn't stay hidden. In the end, it wasn't just about justice. It was about believing children. Giving them safe spaces. Trusting that even when they can't speak, they can still be heard. And above all, it was about love. The kind of love that doesn't need words, the kind a girl shares with her dog.